Your Excellency, Minister Seleshi Bekele, Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, the Undersecretary General and the Executive Secretary of ECA, Dr. Songwe, the Excellencies that are here, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you today to this joint launch with the government of the Republic, the Federal Republic, Democratic Republic of Ethiopia and ECA to a truly transformative project, the Green Legacy. The project will deliver nature-based solutions of hydropower and water resources, infrastructure, and community resilience in Ethiopia. It is an exciting initiative which has many objectives, some of which you are going to hear from the presentations and the various speakers that will be speaking this morning. It is especially instructive that we are launching this initiative during these unprecedented times of COVID-19 pandemic, which has exacerbated the already existing climate change emergency. Let us therefore remind ourselves of our responsibility of the health and the safety of each other, as well as the health and sustainability and ecosystems of ourselves and for prosperity. It is instructive that we are launching this initiative in this time. We owe this to our children and the future generations to rehabilitate our ecosystems and use them for responsibly. I would like now to turn to the program to just take us through what is going to take place this morning. We will have a presentation, and I hope my colleague that is sitting in Seychelles is available to deliver that presentation, which will outline the areas and interventions and benefits of the project. We will then have interventions from various speakers. We will start with the ones that are already here. We will have remarks from the regions, just to tell us a little bit more in terms of the work that they're doing in their own regions. We'll have the remark from His Excellency Alem Asefa, Commissioner of Environment, Protection, Forest, Climate Change, who is also the Commissioner for that area. And that will be followed off by the Minister who is here, also give remarks, and then we'll have Dr. Songwe to also speak to us. And then we'll move into the signing ceremony of the Memorandum of Understanding, of which is going to launch, in actual sense, the project itself, the Green Legacy. We'll have a media briefing thereafter, where Dr. Songwe and Dr. Bekele, the Minister, will have an interaction with the media. And then we'll come back, then we go to a tree planting ceremony. I just want to mention onset, Your Excellency, Minister, that last year, ECA planted 275 plants within the compound. And we're proud to mention that of those, 250 have actually survived. So we're really very proud to be part of this monumental initiative of the Prime Minister and to be able to follow through and also to continue this legacy today. So without further ado, I would like to call upon my colleague. I don't know how that's been arranged. I suppose is ready to give the presentation on the project before we invite the various speakers to speak to us. JP, I don't know if you're hearing me.
I can hear you, Oliver, and I'm just about to share the presentation.
Thank you.
It's a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to say a few words today and to introduce this project and the various aspects of this project. And I regret that I cannot be with you in person, precisely due to the challenges that we face around COVID-19, which are disrupting the way we work, the way in which we travel, but which we reinforce at this time the need for us to act in concert to build back better and to achieve results that improve outcomes for citizens in all of our countries. So nature-based solutions are a critical component towards getting back on track to address climate change and also to change the trajectory in relation to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Nature-based solutions are a key component to allow us to build better and to respond to the immediate economic crisis caused by COVID-19, and to also deal with the climate emergency that we are facing on a daily basis, and which particularly affects Africa and the citizens of our continent. I will touch on some of the background to the project. First of all, we note that Africa is an incredibly diverse and rich in biodiversity as a continent. It has immense natural resources which have huge economic value, but these natural resources are also being degraded, particularly linked to high deforestation, increased human and livestock populations, often underperforming agricultural practices, and also, in many cases, unsustainable land use practices. And climate change alone can cause the loss of over half of African bird and mammal species, as well as trigger a 20% to 30% decline in lake productivity and a significant loss of plant species. So this project and what we want to achieve in Africa is particularly important because we are looking at ecosystems as the basis for economic recovery. Africa has been a leader in restoring degraded ecosystems, and 27 countries have pledged to restore significant amounts of our degraded landscapes. In relation to the situation in Ethiopia itself, we must recognize the extent of land and forest degradation and also the negative consequences that this brings about. Ethiopia has been a leader and has made a very strong voluntary commitment in the context of the Bonn Challenge to implement forest landscape restoration on 15 million hectares. It has also ambitiously planned to plant 20 billion seedlings from 2019 to 2024, of which 5 billion seedlings are being planted in 2020. In relation to the challenges in Ethiopia, pursuant to restore degraded lands and address societal and environmental challenges around the water reservoir infrastructure, the ECA collaborated with the Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy to develop these community-led nature-based solutions programs. So the program is particularly aimed at changing the landscape on the ground, at improving outcomes for citizens and for their communities. So why go for nature-based solutions? Firstly, because nature-based solutions allow us to address three interdependent challenges. And these include biodiversity degradation, the human well-being, and climate change. And nature-based solutions recognize the indelible link that exists between these three aspects, and also that our current trajectory is not sustainable. We currently are not making enough progress on climate change. We are currently seeing increased biodiversity degradation, and this is having a challenge, is presenting a direct challenge to be able to deliver in terms of human well-being, where we have noted that previous benefits that have been achieved, for example, through the Millennium Development Goals, have been driven by high levels of economic growth, which are being seen in the current scenario. So nature-based solutions tackles both the issues of climate mitigation as well as adaptation challenges. And this is particularly important in the context of the continued implementation of the Paris Agreement, which has often focused too much on mitigation and has not looked particularly at the needs of developing countries for adaptation. Nature-based solutions in this context also incorporate green and blue infrastructure in urban areas to improve the facilities that are available for citizens. It also applies ecosystem principles to agricultural systems to improve outputs, but also to ensure that there is protection of the land and avoiding land degradation. It acknowledges, just like the 2030 Agenda Sustainable Development Goals, the interdependencies of the social, environmental, and economic goals, and encourages actions that promote synergies among them. So some of the details on our nature-based solutions that we are putting forward through this project. It aims to provide low-cost solutions to protect water infrastructure while delivering a wider range of ecosystem services and protecting vulnerable sectors of society. The project will be implemented in 3 hotspot areas of the Nile, namely Mugar, Buder, and Jema watersheds. And it also considers a range of activities in Afar, Somalia, and Addis Ababa administration to diversify life of the communities. The program also that we are doing jointly between the ministry and the ECA contributes to the nation's low-emission, climate-resilient infrastructure and development plans, and therefore links directly to the nationally determined contributions by deploying appropriate forms of green interventions and also developing capacity, particularly the skills of young people, and also harnessing new technologies through knowledge exchange, technology transfer schemes. It also aims to increase the overall forest cover and consequently improve carbon sequestration, minimize siltation by reducing soil erosion, and enhance livelihoods through participation in forest management. So the major outputs will involve the increased carbon sequestration by planting and managing 450 hectares of indigenous and exotic tree species as part of the Green Legacy Initiative campaign. Also rehabilitating degraded land through the construction of various soil and water conservation structures and building resilience of infrastructure, ecosystems, and local communities by reducing siltation and improving the livelihoods of 150,000 households through the provision of energy-saving stoves and other livelihood options. These livelihood options include improving the opportunities that people in communities will be facing, will have, such as planting fruit trees, fodder trees, providing beehives, and these will particularly improve the outcomes for women, as well as creating employment opportunities for youth groups. So some of the other major outputs include enhancing the capacity of institutions and local communities to be involved in project implementation through various interventions. It will also be part of a wider strategy that the UNEC is implementing to reduce its carbon footprint and that of related UN operations in Ethiopia through a carbon offsetting scheme. And carbon offsetting schemes will become increasingly important as part of the solutions to climate change globally, as well as building on local initiatives and national initiatives. And perhaps most importantly, because we're talking about building back better and improving the immediate outcomes for citizens of Ethiopia, it's about creating employment opportunities for 1,500 youth and women in fabricating energy-saving stoves. And these energy-saving stoves, which operate on cleaner energy, are particularly important because they also reduce the risk of air pollution, which is significant, particularly in developing countries. The approach taken will be actively engaged with our regional governments, through local communities, through development partners, international institutions, and other stakeholders, including the identification and selection of tree species to ensure that they are appropriate for the impact that we want to have. The capacity building in terms of seedling raising, site preparation, tree and post-planting management, and as well as the energy-saving stoves production on site, capacity building and livelihood diversification schemes. The direct beneficiaries first and foremost will be the people of Ethiopia themselves. The local communities will be benefiting directly from the various uses of the employment and the institutional and capacity development. And the project interventions will be gender informed to ensure equal access to jobs and other benefits of the intervention. The indirect beneficiaries are at the global level, where this will be a very practical example of a nature-based solution to reduce the impact of climate change while improving economic outcomes. The contributions, the overall estimated cost of implementing the project will be $3.6 million US, actually over 4 years. And the Green Legacy Initiative has many important lessons which can be applied on a wider basis across our continent. So through this collaboration between ECA and the Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy, we will disseminate these lessons and hopefully build partnerships with other countries across our continent to bolster the contribution of nature-based solution resilience building. And we hope also to take this experience to inform the negotiations in relation to the Conference of Parties on Climate Change as an example which is practical and which is based in communities around the needs, the immediate needs of citizens, and which is therefore a practical example of building back better through a green recovery which simultaneously tackles climate change, improves economic outcomes and livelihoods. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. His Excellency Dr. Engineer Sleshi Bekkele, distinguished guests from international community and participants. First, I would like to express my gratitude and honor to make a speech on this important event while United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and the Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy for initiating, design and funding a project called Building Resilience for Community and Water Resource Infrastructure through Nature-Based Solutions. I hope the project will contribute to the effort we are trying to achieve the national objective toward this greening legacy initiative, which makes the environment is a central part and puts solid facts that the quality of our life depends on the proper existence of environmental resources such as soil and water. In line with the national objective, Addis Ababa City is targeting to meet the Greening Legacy Initiative programs through one of the core activities. The initiative expected to bring a positive microclimate change, which will be reflected through increasing groundwater availability, reducing soil erosion, and land degradation. Moreover, it will play a role in cooling effect, despite temperature rise, contribute carbon sequestration from city carbon emitter sectors, create an opportunity to trade carbon, and reduce flooding by reducing the amount and the speed of runoff water. Finally, as Addis Ababa Environmental Protection and Green Development Commission, we are glad to collaborate and support the projects throughout implementation. I hope the project will play a significant role in framing prosperous Ethiopia by creating a vibrant economy by implementing nature-based solutions, such as tree planting, protection of water infrastructure, and has a role in creating job opportunities for vulnerable community groups, which include youth and women. Thank you so much.
Your Excellency, Dr. Vera Songwe, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations, Executive Secretary of Economic Commission for Africa, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, let me congratulate all those who have worked hard to materialize this joint project between ECA and Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy of Ethiopia. As you know, last year, His Excellency Prime Minister Dr. Abiy launched a nationwide Green Legacy initiative that ultimately plants 20 billion trees in 4 years. Last year, we have targeted 4 billion and achieved 4.7 billion with a record planting per day of 353 million seedlings. Ethiopia's initiative is an ambitious target that requires significant public mobilization, capacity to plan and implement resource allocation and monitoring the implementation. In this regard, the collaboration across ministries, regions, and also people in all walks of life is very remarkable. Some studies show if the whole world work together and plant 1.3 trillion additional trees, we could reverse climate change. It is estimated that young trees absorb 6 kilograms of CO2 per tree each year, and when trees reach its productive stage, it is expected to sequester 22 kilograms of carbon per year. It means a typical single pine tree of 60 years can sequester 1.5 tons of CO2. It is well known that trees and forests enhance rainfall, reduce the heat, reverse degradation and desertification. That's why we have to bank on tree planting in order to reverse degradation and climate change. As you all well know, Ethiopia has unique topographic features, including diversified agroecology, vegetation, and ecosystems. Ethiopia's mountains and highlands are known for being the source of many potential rivers which flow through the country and finally cross the national boundary to neighboring countries. Through time, as a result of rapid population increase and escalating demand for fuel wood and land for cropping and grazing, has caused deforestation along with a variety of other environmental problems which directly affected availability of potable water, lessened volume of surface water, depletion of aquifers, and biodiversity loss. It also heavily exacerbated erosion and sedimentation. The process have led to an exploitation of the country's natural resource that is faster than the natural replacement rates. Ethiopia's Green Legacy campaign has multifaceted objectives. Let me mention few of the most important aspects. One, plantation and post-plantation activities like weeding, soil cultivation, replacement, and watering until the seedling becomes strong enough to face any upcoming hardship and increase survival of the seedlings. This well-coordinated campaign is not only inspiring, but also producing far-reaching contribution in reducing the impact of climate change and awareness creation and working together as a nation. Two, National Greening Action Program will have a direct link in achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. As we mark the decade of action for SDGs, we have to really capitalize on such kind of big initiative in order to achieve the SDGs within the remaining period. The goals and the targets within SDGs, such as Goal 1, ending poverty, Goal 2, ending hunger, Goal 3, good health and well-being, Goal 6, clean water and sanitation, Goal 7, affordable and clean energy, Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, Goal 13, climate actions, Goal 15, life on land, and Goal 17, partnership, are directly related to this program initiative. One can also link to other goal areas like women and gender, education, etc., as it was alluded by Mr. Daba, who spoke before me. To achieve these goals, we recognize that we need to transform our relationship with nature. As nature is a key, we must safeguard the ecosystems that sustain billions of livelihoods. Third, jobs and productivity is another important aspect that the Green Legacy can provide. Many young people are engaged in nursery of seedlings, preparing pits, plantation, and nurturing the planted trees. The plants themselves, as we planned and implemented, include nearly 50% agroforestry solutions that are including fruits and fodders. These are very important actually to enhance availability of food and income. Overall, not only the land and water, but also labor productivity will increase. Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam is this year filled with the first 4.9 billion. That largely will remain as dead storage, which is going to absorb the sediment in future during operation of the reservoir. So undertaking this kind of intervention in the river basin actually helps us in order to extend or prolong the life of this important infrastructure of multi-billion dollar. Therefore, what we are doing here in a small scale, which appears to be small scale, will have very serious impact in the overall well-being of Ethiopian infrastructure and socio-economy. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellency Dr. Vera Songwe, I would like to conclude by thanking again all players of this process who devoted their time in designing the project document. I express my thanks to Dr. Vera Songwe, UN ECA's Executive Secretary, for guiding this program personally, and other members of ECA for the time devoted to this and mobilizing the financial support. I'm sure the initial phase of this 3.8
This
billion
meeting being
US dollar
recorded.
will extend beyond this because the challenge is huge. So I thank you very much.
Excellency Dr. and Engineer Seleshi Bekele, Minister of Water, Irrigation and Energy of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues and from the United Nations family, UNEP, UNDP, that are here with us today, of course, ECA staff, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to welcome you here today. In the days of COVID, we don't have that many people in this rooms often, so it's good to see a few more people here today. We are here on the occasion of the implementation of the nature-based solutions for water resources and infrastructure management in Ethiopia, but also as part of what we're calling the launch of the Decade of Action. We do have it in here, but it's in French. On the other side, it's in English. The Secretary General of the United Nations has decided to ensure that we continue to go forward with the Decade of Action. As you know, the Sustainable Development Goals will come to the end in 2030. We are in 2020 today, but we are riddled with COVID. And there is a lot of debate about whether we will actually achieve the SDGs in 2030 or whether we need to postpone them. The SG has decided we continue on forward. And I think that us being here today is a demonstration that we can actually win the battle against COVID and we can continue to do things that will help us to meet the Decade of Action. As we launch the Decade of Action in the middle of COVID, there are an enormous amount of challenges that we must take care of. One of them is our livelihoods. One of the things that when you talk to many people, they tell you about is the fact that because of COVID, we have done a lot better at climate change. We're driving less cars, we're taking less planes, and so essentially we're already contributing to the climate change goals. But we need to do more, which is why we are here today, because we need to start taking some more tangible steps. His Excellency the Minister has already told us what will happen if we can plant 1.3 trillion trees and what that will do for the continent. But every big initiative starts with a small step. And I think the government of Ethiopia has invested in nature-based solutions as its own way of tackling climate change through the Green Legacy Program. The Green Legacy Program for us is not just a program of planting trees. It is also a program for jobs. It's a program for, we call the Economic Commission for Africa, so we also worry about the economics of it. Today, on the continent, we lose about 3 to 5% of our GDP because of climate change. That is a huge amount of resources that we lose if we do not ensure that our climate does better. In some places, it's about 15% that we lose, particularly in the Sahel regions. So we do need to do something as a continent. But again, we have to start with a small step in a country and then take it further. We even need to start in a particular region, and that is why today we are working and we want to thank the regions of Amhara, Afar, Somalia, Oromia, and Addis Ababa, and our thoughts to the people of Afar, because we were supposed to start planting trees there as well, but because of the flooding, we have not been able to start. And we hope that we will be able to start and launch the Afar process as well soon enough. The nature-based solutions for water resources management and infrastructure and community resilience is important for us because it creates jobs. I think as a lot of my colleagues have already said, part of the whole infrastructure for the Agenda 2030 and for the Decade of Action is to create jobs. Africa, we know, needs to create somewhere between 13 to 15 million jobs a year to be able to reach full employment. Ethiopia, I think, needs to create about 3 million a year. So everything that we can do to help support job creation is important. So when we look at the Green Legacy project, we look at it through a jobs lens, and we say, what can we do? And when the minister and I spoke about this last year, and he said, you have to help me, we said, we don't want to just help you plant trees, we need to help you create jobs. So how can we create jobs? And that's a little bit how this project was born. We said, let's take it forward and see how we can make it also a job creation project. And so I really want to thank my colleagues who then took it forward Jean-Paul and James Morambetsi, and decided, we could do something bigger and we could do something better in ensuring that we create jobs. We're starting with 1,500 jobs for youth and women, and we hope that every year we can continue, if we're successful, and depending on what we learn from the project, to do more as we go forward. It is also going to improve the livelihoods of 150,000 households. If you assume in Ethiopia that every household has about 7 to 10 people, we're talking about 1 million households, and then there is an externality effect around that. I think the minister is the Minister of Energy, and each time we talk about energy. Energy is an important part of the development process of every country. And again, part of what we're trying to do here is see how we can improve on energy saving mechanisms. We know that on the continent today, over 3.7 million women die from respiratory diseases because of poor heating and cooking services. So just in comparison, 3.7 million people die from respiratory diseases. Right now we're at about 1-point-something million people on COVID. So that is the magnitude of it. Again, I think as the minister said, it's a small project, but if we can fix the respiratory part of the problem, we actually begin to fix, we're doing some studies now in ECA that show that kids from 0 to 7 actually suffer quite a lot from respiratory diseases on the continent, which essentially affects their education when we put them in school. So there is a huge cost to respiratory diseases on the continent, and if we can, through this process, save and solve some of those issues, then we will also have done, I think, a good service in terms of working towards improving healthcare as we go forward. But also, the whole idea of creating cooking stoves is also a job-creating process that we hope we can then replicate across Ethiopia and then across the sub-region in ways that will ensure that we reduce the communicable and non-communicable diseases, but also ensure that we're creating jobs. And that's one thing to plant the trees, is another thing when people cut them down to heat themselves and cook. So we need to make sure that when we plant the trees, they stay planted and that we find and provide alternative methods for cooking for our households. 20% of indoor air pollution is caused by domestic fuel burning. And so if we can do this and improve the cooking stoves process, again, we reduce the indoor pollution and also reduce then the cost of healthcare, so essentially saving government some resources. So you see quite an economic package that we're trying to put together, even though what we're talking about is planting trees. So I think what we've tried to do and what my colleagues have done is really come together in a comprehensive way to show that we can do more and we can do better when we start with a small idea and how big we can grow it. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very pleased to confirm we had started planting on Saturday, and thanks to the colleagues at MOWI who really helped us last weekend. What we wanted to do was get to today having planted 50,000 trees. So we started planting trees. 6,000 trees have already been planted in Amhara, I think 2,000 in Oromia, some in Addis Ababa. Yesterday we had, thank you very much to the government yesterday, and thanks to the ECA team who went out to plant yesterday. We hope that we can finalize the 50,000 target by the end of this week so that we can meet the challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, for us to meet the Africa we want and ensure that we meet Agenda 2063, we will need to do more, we will need to do better, but we will also need to do faster, because 10 years is a very short time. As we talk about it, we're already ending the first year of our decade of action and ending it under the specter of COVID. But we hope that we can catch up by the time we get to 2030 by continuing to do actions like this and activities like this. The minister has already talked about the importance of the work that we're doing for the river basin, so I wouldn't go back to that. But those are important issues that we hope that over time we can also get other donors and more resources to come together to ensure that we can protect our water systems. Through this collaboration, again, as Jean-Paul said, there are many other water systems on the continent that we are hoping and looking forward to protecting, and we hope we can learn lessons from this. Ethiopia is also part of the Energy Commission of the United Nations and the conversations that we're having around COP. So we hope that we can take these experiences of the green legacy and the protection of nature-based solutions for resilience building to that conversation to ensure that we can continue to provide new ideas for how we can ensure better energy provision for the continent. Finally, I want to once again thank the government of Ethiopia. I want to thank in particular the minister and the team, I know, working over the weekends together to ensure that we could procure the seedlings, that we could get it to the different regions on time. Thank you very much for all that work. But most importantly, I think when we meet again, because we should meet again, we should make sure that the women that we want to support have actually received the support. I would like that when we meet in 6 months or a year, we can actually begin to get the stories of the women who now have better breathing conditions, that we have improved the health of 150,000 households, that we have created jobs, and that we have created a community of young employers that can themselves become small and medium business entrepreneurs as they protect the trees, as they do the cooking stoves, and as they decide on what kinds of solutions we need for more resilience. So really, I think this is just the beginning of a hope journey, of a journey of hope, a journey of economic development, a journey of incomes, a journey of livelihoods, a journey of better health for women in Ethiopia and in the sub-region as we go forward. So once again, thank you for taking the time to come and join the ECA family to launch this project, and we hope that we will continue to work together with you as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Executive Secretary, for those remarks, and sort of puts the everything into place in terms of where we are going, which is very helpful in moving forward on this very, very important initiative that we've started. We have now come to the most important part of why we are here, and this is to seal the deal, if I may put it that way, by signing the Memorandum of Understanding of the implementation of the nature-based solution for water resources, infrastructure, and community resilience in Ethiopia. And therefore, would like to invite His Excellency the Minister, Dr. Bekele, and the Executive Secretary to just move to the tables that have been laid here, to have the signing ceremony of the Memorandum of Understanding. May I ask the Executive Secretary and the Minister to... Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, the major media takeaway, I would think, is one is a contribution to the Green Legacy Initiative through the partnership of United Nations family and Ethiopia, that we contribute to the 5 billion trees together. The second point is that as the title indicates, it's a nature-based solution. It's very critical for sustainability of our environment and our continent, that what we do through this solution is actually reversing the challenge that the global community or the world is facing in terms of degradation, climate change, and so on. So this plays very significant role. The third point I would like to mention is financing and partnership through the convening power of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, as well as other UN family. it is possible to mobilize necessary finance, linking it to the various programs, whether it is to SDGs or climate change, by bringing resource, then developing countries like Ethiopia can be supported in their programs. So the partnership we established through this is very important for the UN. It provides an opportunity really to work also at grassroots level. Perhaps the fourth one is creating job opportunity and really stand up to the challenge that we face day to day in Africa. So these are the few things I would like to mention. Thank you.
Madam Vera Songwe, what are your key points? You did emphasize job creation. This is not just about planting trees. This is also this is not just about planting trees. This is also about livelihoods and about creating jobs, maybe green jobs as well. Could you perhaps just elaborate a little bit on how you see this contributing to the decade of action, and especially in a time of COVID, how do we move forward?
UN, United Nations personnel on the ground in Ethiopia, and part of what we do is drive around, take planes, and so I hope that this initiative is part of the UN ECA and the United Nations carbon sequestration impact as well. What we have decided to do as ECA is contribute by reducing our footprint on the climate, and one way of doing that is essentially by doing what we're doing now, so that at the end of the year, when we look at what has been ECA and the United Nations in Ethiopia in general's impact on the overall climate, we can then use this as part of our carbon contribution for reducing our footprint. So that's the first thing. The second thing is back to jobs. We hope that we can, with this, create more jobs. There is also a very direct link, of course, between job creation and health. With 150,000 households that we will be able to support by providing better cooking systems, better cleaning stoves, we hope that you will have less absenteeism at work, and so we will have more productivity in the economy and therefore larger GDPs. And finally, of course, when you work, you earn income. So we hope that through this project, we can ensure that we can increase livelihoods, increase the incomes of young and particularly women, people who will begin to understand how to start a business and how to run a business. So from an economic perspective, as we said, climate change costs Africa somewhere between 3 to 5% of GDP. If we can begin to reduce that number by initiatives such as the Green Legacy program of the Prime Minister and the resilience and nature-based solutions to protecting our river basins, which are particularly important, then I think we would have made a huge contribution. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Meles Cacho from Voice of America. How long would this project take, and what are the targeted achievements that are expected during the project?
Good morning. My name is Hassan from Al Jazeera. My questions is for His Excellency Seleshi Bakali. As you say, there are many negative effects from the climate change. Maybe most of them is salutation. So how can salutations affect the dam in Ethiopia, especially in the GERD? Some Arabic newspapers say salutation will be made for the GERD just work for 15 years. So what the effect about this?
Thank you both for the questions. I think, again, on the impact of the project, the first is jobs. The first is greening the environment, ensuring that we can improve our overall environment. We have talked about, in concrete numbers, 150,000 lively households that will be supported with improved cooking stoves. We have talked about 1,500 youth and women that will also then be trained on how to do this. We have talked about what we would like to do eventually is when we plant the trees, actually pay people to protect those trees and ensure that the trees actually stay. There is, let's say, a loss rate of somewhere between 15 to 20%. In the ECA compound, we planted 575 trees last year, and 550, is it 500, 250 trees, 275 trees. We planted 275 trees and 250 trees survived. So you have to take care of the trees. It's not enough to just plant them. You have to take care of them. And part of the taking care process is job creation for the youth. So we hope that through this process we can create some more jobs. We can also then teach people about environmental conservation and forestry and create a young cadre of people that can understand the importance of protecting these trees. Secondly, it's not just about, and I think this is part of the conversation we had with the ministry, you don't plant any tree anyway. You have to understand where you're planting and what you're planting and how you're planting. And that's a whole ecosystem of education, technology transfer that we put into the system. And so we hope with that we can then spread it first in the sub-region and then in other parts of the continent. So 3 things again: ECAs and the United Nations carbon sequestration, our contribution to climate change and carbon emission reduction, because we travel a lot, so we do need to do something that can negate the impact that we create by our travels. We love to take Ethiopian Airlines, but that is a little bit polluting, so we planned and we do that to ensure that we are contributing. And then of course job creation and the work. On the siltation, I can say more, but I think that the minister is a lot more eloquent. But you know, when you have soil erosion, what happens is that it moves into the river streams and the river basins. I come from Cameroon, and we also have long rivers, the river Senegal, and we have an extensive amount of dams and waters. And so we have understood this technology as well, that you need to actually protect the river basins and the river flows, because if you don't do that, you lose your sources of water. So I think a huge and important part, it's one thing to have a dam, but it's another thing to ensure that the water flow continues in an uninterrupted way. And what siltation does is that it reduces the waterbed so that you don't have as much water flowing in. And I think what we're trying to do with this is to ensure that we can protect all the river streams. The river streams are important for energy, but they're also important for agriculture. And we know that 80% of our rural populations depend on agriculture for their livelihood. So indirectly, we are also ensuring that we can protect agricultural livelihoods in our rural communities.
Thank you for the questions. The Executive Secretary explained, but just to add a few things. On the siltation issue, as you know, the Ethiopian population is rapidly growing, and when you look at the highland areas, most of the land is utilized for crop cultivation. That means deforesting and expanding agricultural land. However, there are marginal land areas which should be utilized not for crops, but rather for plants, and planting trees, making soil and water conservation happen in these marginal land areas. In the past, the traditional practice was just expanding extensification of agriculture instead of intensifying, and to choose what is the best for improving production and productivity in the landscape in different agroecologies, as the Executive Secretary indicated. So in those areas, we have to really invest our workforce, our labor, invest in terms of choosing what works best in terms of improving livelihood and reversing degradation. So in these marginal land areas, the soil erosion is very, very intense. If you plow with the traditional practice for crop cultivation, the income level is not adequate, but the soil gets eroded because of large slope and intensive rainfall amount. Therefore, we have to really rethink how we could manage our resource, which is land, as well as also natural resources like forest, water, and rain. So our green legacy plays a very critical role. Number one, it works on the mindset of people, that keeping the soil where it is, as much as possible also retain the water in order to enhance water budget. One, to recharge the groundwater, where you can get better springs for the dry season, and so on, help us in terms of getting clean water for drinking, for small-scale irrigation and so on. Second, it will control the amount of erosion and sediment that is transported into the river systems and downstream into the major infrastructures. So investment of people in the landscape, utilizing the land, in every year, we mobilize up to 12 to 15 million people actually to do soil and water conservation work. Each of them invest about up to 30 days, free labor. People are already having a better mindset in terms of keeping the natural resource at place. So when we add additional nature-based solution, not only soil and water conservation, but also plant trees, those planted trees actually have the capacity of all what we have said earlier in terms of carbon sequestration, in terms of increasing recharge into the groundwater, in terms of keeping the soil where it is, in terms of diversifying the livelihood. For example, if we target not only wood trees, but also agroforestry solutions like fruits, what we just started with ECA in different regions to identify fruit trees which are compatible with the agroecologies, so that the youth actually working on those intervention areas will have a very good income. If we take, for example, avocado, an avocado tree can produce 300 kilograms of avocado per year, which each of these kilograms are actually $3, $5. If we export, it's very much improved income for the people living there. It not only creates jobs, temporary jobs, but creates really sustainable livelihood. So in a hectare, you can gain multiple income compared to the crop production. So it plays this kind of role, but it, for direct response to the question, it protects the soil, which ultimately reaches into the river system and ultimately into our infrastructure like Gibe River, Gibe dams, Grand Ethiopia Renaissance dams, and other dams. What does that mean? When you protect the soil where it is, not only improving the productivity of the system in the landscape, but at the terminal reservoirs we are building, we are extending the life. The sediment that is incoming into the reservoirs quickly, if it is silted up, then it clogs the intake structures and the bottom outlets and so on. Once that is clogged, the reservoir is not functioning anymore. Therefore, in order to extend the life of this kind of infrastructure, we have to invest in our watersheds, in river basins, in order to really protect the watershed and so on. So that's how it is interlinked. But the additional benefits are quite a lot. So on the other question, what are the targeted achievement? It is explained 150,000 households will be benefiting from this, which means in every household, you know, many people live, and the impact will be directly reaching to 1% of the total population. It's very significant by compared to the investment level. However, this serves as, you know, a good learning. If we do together through research, evaluate the impact in terms of improvement in household income, in terms of sediment yield, etc., we can see the impact very clearly. How far these systems, actually, where we did these major interventions, how far it has diversified the livelihood. We can think of in the forest, beekeeping is, for example, one of it. Cut and carry system of grass for improving productivity of the livestock could be another dimension. We could look at it. And so through this, we can really evaluate the impact exactly as relevant to your question. So there is the front side of impact evaluation, ex-ante type of evaluation can be done, but also ex post after we did the intervention and see what will happen after the intervention and maturity of these systems. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir, and ma'am, for the opportunity to ask. My name is Agazi. I come from African Renaissance TV, and I have a few questions for His Excellency Seleshi Bekele, Dr. Seleshi Bekele, Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy of the FDRE, Republic of Ethiopia. My line of questioning is centered on the current issue regarding the Grand Renaissance Dam, and I would like to ask 3 brief questions about what's going on, since it's related to energy. The first one is a lot of researchers are debating the percentage of water Ethiopia are supposed to get from the negotiations that are happening. So I would like to ask if you and your team has this in mind when they when they proceed with the negotiations. The second one is inside the negotiations, Sudan and the AU have a stance that's not really solid or temporary. So regarding Sudan's stance and regarding the AU's assistance on the matter, I would like to brief us. The last one is, once Ethiopia has completed the Grand Renaissance Dam, we know our energy capacity is going to rise from 27% to 100%. So what about what is the infrastructure being done in the country at the moment to sufficiently expand our energy sector? Thank you very much, sir.
Continue? Okay. Thank you. This is not the platform for garden negotiation, but I will just say a few things. The negotiation will commence potentially next Monday. That is a short answer for that. The current construction on GERD is ongoing, unabated. It will continue, and the second year filling most probably will happen next rainy season. The energy capacity is undiminished. It is 15.7 terawatt hour. So mark that. And turbine issues, the technical issues. There is no reduction of energy. But in terms of tree planting, it has very, very significant importance on the Grand Ethiopia Renaissance Dam. We have to reverse degraded areas by having better improved soil control systems and clean water flowing into the GERD. In fact, downstream countries should help in investing on this in the form of best practices like we learn from other dam systems, in the form of like payment for environmental services, also getting clean water and regulated water, which prevents flooding and not bringing a lot of silt that creates problem on the infrastructure in the downstream. So the short responses for the 3 questions are this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are coming to the conclusion of this briefing. I'd just like to express my gratitude to Madam Vera Songwe, Executive Secretary of the Economic Commission for Africa, and Minister Seleshi, for your time and for elaborating on this project. We hope that in a year's time or less, when we come back, we will have a lot of concrete examples. There'll be a presentation showing real stories of how this project and this work on the green legacy and on preserving nature-based solutions will have an impact. And we want to see stories that the media can take on and talk about going forward. Thank you very much. Please I think we can now head towards the gardens, the ECA gardens for the tree planting. Please follow our colleagues, the conference services colleagues. You'll be guided. I'd also like to request that you allow our visitors to exit so that this is done in an orderly manner, unless our conference services staff have alternative arrangements.